a charge of sentimentality. I thought I was being quite quite realistic. I mean, I really do think that in all these discussions about Afghanistan, Pakistan, and so forth, the missing element is the fantastic importance of our alliance with India, for which, as I say, I think Andrew Robertson and Neil Ferguson can say British rule wasn't all that bad if they like. So did Marx. But it's also an achievement of the cooperation of the secular left in India and the United Kingdom. But moving along with it, partition. There was a book written by a man called Sir Penderell Moon, one of the last heads of the India office, and I think one time governor of Bengal. It's called Divide and Quit.
Yes.
You see the joke right away.
Yes.
Britain leaves Ireland in a shocking state and amputated at independence. It leaves India-Pakistan in a shocking state and amputated at independence. It does the same with Cyprus. It tried the same in Eritrea. Lord Carrington, Mrs. Thatcher's foreign secretary for a long time, proposed a partition of South Africa before independence, so that there would be whites-only federal states within the South African Union. Carrington and Owen, it seems to be an almost tick-like reaction of the British Foreign Office, proposed the partition of Bosnia to gratify the ambitions of the Milosevic Serbs and the Tudjman Croats. This is an appalling record, and I think needs to be subjected to a lot of criticism. And, I've published a lot of that. No, I would be against any attempt to re-romanticize the British Empire, but I think, and it's not just a question of the successor regimes often being so ghastly. It's a matter of what one used to call the dialectic. I mean, it's combined and uneven development. The terrible things happened during the British rule in India, but out of it came something you can describe as a serious country. I can't think of much to be said, frankly, for the British presence in Cyprus or in Ireland.
How unrecognizable is modern Britain?
To me,
the Britain that was home to you.
When I think of my boyhood, going to school on a steam train, pictures of the world, maps of the world behind the teacher in the classroom, which would Mercator projection to show Britain more or less at the centre and as much as possible of the world, including places like Sudan, which didn't really belong, all painted red or pink. It's as if I was brought up in the 30s rather than the 50s. People listen to me politely when I tell them about it, but they really can't imagine what I'm talking about.
Was television an important force, or was it that late coming to Britain?
It was very late coming to any of our set, and rather frowned upon, especially when the BBC's monopoly was broken, and there was something called the old people sometimes still do call it commercial television, with advertisements on it, and every homage paid to the meretricious and the celebrity, all of that kind of thing. My father had no time for at all.
How austere was the Britain you grew up in?
Very. You couldn't leave the country taking more than, I think, £5 or £10 in cash. You couldn't have a bank account overseas. Foreign holidays were a real luxury. That was the thing I think that bore most on me. Supermarkets were practically unknown and rather frowned on as being too Americanized. Very, very difficult to get a decent meal anywhere. Everything would shut very early. The British tradition of service, well remembered by me. We're not here for our health. Everything would be all right if it wasn't for the pesky customers demanding things. Not brutal, not poverty, but a great fear of poverty, a consciousness all the time there wasn't quite enough to go around. And this visited on, people like my parents who had been brought up and come to young man and womanhood in the 30s and the 20s in times of slump and deprivation, followed then by war, followed then by... J.G. Ballard has a wonderful description of coming back from being interned in a camp in Shanghai as a schoolboy. The British Empire in the East collapsed. Coming back to Britain only afterwards. You'd never been to Britain before. I couldn't believe how poor it was. And he said they kept on about how they'd won the war, but the people looked as if they were in the country that had lost the war. They looked like a defeated people.
So
drab, grey, terrible teeth, terrible skin. Everyone looked very sort of scruffy and poor. Remember that very well. And, because I'm from southern England, which was well within range of the Luftwaffe, and also because I was brought up on Navy bases and naval towns like Plymouth and Portsmouth. Bomb damage everywhere, well into the 60s. Big scars of bombardment that no one had got around to properly filling in.
How big a shock is it to you to see people like David Cameron self-consciously changing their accents to make it sound like they come from a less elegant background than they do? People dressing, looking downward rather than looking upward. Is that among the more important transformations?
I think it's essential. It speaks to my depths because, and I view it with infinite pain. I mean, with my parents, the aspiration was entirely in the other direction. My father must have spent a certain amount of money, I think, on elocution at a certain point, and perhaps my mother too, so that they didn't sound as if they came.
Not as much as Cameron spent.
Well, I think he sort of came by naturally.
No. There's nothing natural about that accent.
I can't hear his voice in my head, I have to say.
Right.
Mrs. Thatcher certainly spent a lot of money on it.
She's the other way.
She went through 3 voices. Well, she was more our model. My father, if it had been
Cameron started
my
speaking.
father, if he left up to him, would have had the accent of the Portsmouth dockyards and the southern Hampshire. My mother would have been Liverpudlian. They spent a lot of time correcting any slovenliness in my speech. And if I put when I started hanging out with more Labour-type people, where the word concern, as you know, is a very important one, or concerned, very often the accent would be on the first syllable, concerned. It would drive her nuts. If I ever wanted to upset her, all I had to do was say, well, that's a concern. No, and well, I write about this quite a lot. Don't let anyone call you Chris. We gave you the name Christopher for a good reason. Don't get matey. So, Dave Cameron, I mean, honestly, it's like Bill Clinton. It jars on me every time. Or Al Gore. Any of this stuff I find exquisitely vulgar and tedious.
How much of it is left of the old empire? None in Britain?
Well, I've written a few things about the so-called Anglosphere, which is, we'll have to come up with a better word for it, I think. But
how about the Indian Empire?
India, Australia, New Zealand, I need hardly say Canada, the United States, still to an extraordinary degree, has a common history, and also revolutionary history, I think, which is underemphasized. And Robert Conquest has written well about it, but I think I was the one to point out to him he should stress India more. And he's also pointed out there are quite a number of countries in Africa, Sierra Leone, and so on, that belong in that Anglosphere too. If you go to Chile, it's quite surprising how well remembered the British presence there is. Admiral Cochrane, the liberation of South America from Spain. A lot of people have English or Irish names.
Bernardo O'Higgins.
Bernardo O'Higgins, great liberator. Cochrane, well remembered. It's not negligible. It's quite an impressive story. A lot of it's very bloody. A lot of it deserves criticism. But someone once said the world never had a kinder master. I used to think that was a bit condescending, but you see what I mean.
Yes. Thank you.
My dear David.
And how clever of you to leave the way open to 2 or 3 more volumes of memoirs.
I don't know if I'll do that again.
Chris,
much harder than I thought it was going to be. But thanks for having me. And thanks for noticing.